Meet Janevra da Vinci, painted in 1474.
Poets describe Janevra as the most beautiful girl in Florence.
But Ginevra's beauty and virtue alone don't explain why Da Vinci painted her.
500 years ago, a quiet painting was created with no idea it would one day face machines that could see beneath its surface. Today, artificial intelligence has scanned a Leonardo da Vinci work, and what it uncovered didn't change history, it confirmed it. Beneath calm brushstrokes and soft shadows lies evidence of deliberate thinking, hidden structure, and choices far ahead of their time. One specific detail, revealed by AI, raises a powerful question about how deeply Leonardo understood vision itself. And once you see it, it's impossible to look at his genius the same way again. The portrait that finally spoke. At first glance, the portrait appears calm, restrained, and almost modest. A young woman sits against a muted landscape, her expression composed, her posture reserved. For centuries, Leonardo da Vinci's portrait of Janevra da Vinci was admired for its beauty, but often overshadowed by more famous works like the Mona Lisa. Yet, this painting never truly faded into the background. Instead, it quietly resisted simple explanations, waiting for the right moment and the right tools to speak again. Painted in the late 15th century, the work is believed to be Leonardo's first female portrait and remains the only painting by him preserved in the United States. That fact alone makes it notable, but what truly sets it apart is how unconventional it is for its time. Italian Renaissance portraits of women were typically rigid, painted in strict profile, more symbolic than personal. Janevra, however, turns slightly toward the viewer. Both eyes meet us. Her gaze is distant, thoughtful, and difficult to read. This was not the norm. It was a quiet challenge to artistic tradition. For generations, art historians sensed there was more beneath the surface. The painting seemed too psychologically complex, too carefully constructed, to be merely decorative or ceremonial. The landscape behind Janevra stretches outward into water and haze, creating a feeling of depth and openness uncommon in portraits of that era. The juniper bush behind her is dense and dark, almost enveloping her presence. These choices raised questions. Why frame her this way? What was Leonardo trying to say? Those questions lingered for centuries without clear answers. Then modern technology entered the conversation. The use of advanced imaging techniques, such as infrared scans, surface analysis, and eventually AI-assisted visual modeling, came into play at the time of the researchers, which was during the period of revealing the details that were otherwise rendered by the naked eye. What was once regarded as subtlety became a characteristic of the painting. AI analysis further revealed this extravagant planning through the cycle of painting and retouching, which was done through the master artist's precise maneuvering of the contours, light transitions, and background depth.
Insatiably curious about reflections and refractions and optics and the human anatomy of the eye.
Such planning was not an unintentional act of creativity, but rather deliberate decisions. More astonishingly, the AI-assisted surface scans validated the presence of Leonardo's fingerprints, which were thought to be lost, that were mainly situated around the tree, made of juniper. This was not accidental, but rather an act of the artist's direct involvement with the pigment, using the fingers to make the edges and transitions soft. He was already mastering the sfumato technique that would later be associated with him. The portrait was not just seen, it was touched, and the artist has physically shaped it. AI didn't change the painting's narrative emotionally. It did not introduce significance. It rather attests to the purpose. It corroborated that the components on which the scholars had argued for years,
significant impact on the artist psychologically.
The way of standing, the look, and the mood were neither coincidences nor conventions. They were young Leonardo's deliberate experiments with painting's power to exceed mere likeness in depth and surface. This is the reason why the portrait always spoke up. Not until the advent of modern tools did it reveal the multitude of questions that had been embedded in it. AIs that had just gotten the opportunity to scrutinize it closely didn't change the course of history. The painting always pointed out that it was a step of the master that had puzzled the world for centuries. He thought deeper, saw further, and worked in ways that only later would be recognized and understood as great. And once this quiet defiance is recognized, it forces us to look closer at the artist himself, who Leonardo was before the world knew his name. Leonardo. Before he was Leonardo. Long before Leonardo da Vinci became a symbol of universal genius, he was simply a young artist trying to find his place in Florence. In the 1470s, when the portrait of Janevra da Vinci was likely painted, Leonardo was in his early 20s, talented, ambitious, and still largely unknown outside select artistic circles. He had not yet painted the works that would secure his immortality. What makes this moment so compelling is that the traits we now associate with his genius were already present, quietly forming beneath the surface. At this stage in his life, Leonardo da Vinci was working in the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, one of Florence's most respected masters. The workshop system was demanding. Apprentices learned not only painting, but also sculpture, engineering, anatomy, and design. Precision mattered. Tradition mattered. Yet Leonardo stood out even then, not because he followed rules well, but because he questioned them constantly. His notebooks from this period reveal a restless mind obsessed with observation. How light behaves, how skin reflects color, how distance alters perception. Florence itself played a crucial role in shaping him. The city was a center of intellectual exchange, where art, science, poetry, and philosophy overlapped. Humanist thinkers debated the nature of beauty and virtue. Artists competed not just for commissions, but for innovation. In this environment, Leonardo absorbed ideas rapidly, but he was never content with repetition. While others refined established formulas, he tested their limits. This context is essential when examining Janevra da Vinci. The portrait was not the work of a mature master repeating a proven style. It was the work of a young artist, experimenting in real time. Leonardo was still defining his artistic identity, and the painting reflects that uncertainty in productive ways. He departed from the rigid profile portraits common in Italy, adopting a more engaging three-quarter view. This choice wasn't merely aesthetic, it reflected a desire to capture inner life, not just outward appearance.
Leonardo da Vinci was a genius in so many different ways.
At this stage, Leonardo had not yet made sfumato his own, but he was already on the way to it. The contrast of light and shadow in Ginevra's face is gentler than in the work of his fellows. The background merges softly into the air, rather than cutting off suddenly. The said artist has been revealing himself in terms of process rather than outlines, someone who prefers to see how forms come out rather than how they are limited by edges. Da Vinci, however, was in an artist's opening stage, and he was not yet able to use the full license that fame provides. He had not yet won the right to do so completely. This fact makes his slight disobedience even more admirable. Each of the unconventional decisions made in the painting is accompanied by a risk factor, selecting a position with complicated psychology, bringing in vague symbolism, crossing rather than clarifying borders. All these were brave moves of an artist who was still trying to assert his worth. Later, centuries down the line, scientists analyzing the painting confirm this view. The planning is done with high precision and is kept under the surface. Changes, removals of, and packing of ideas are all visible. This is by no means a case of youthful impetuousness. It is rather a case of controlled probing. He was sketching ideas that he would later refine in the likes of The Lady with an Ermine and the Mona Lisa. Looking at Leonardo during this period makes us realize that genius does not turn up in full bloom. It goes through the process of trial, error, and the shedding of doubt. The portrait of Janevra da Vinci is a witness to the métier of Leonardo just before the legend, when his genius was already there but needed time to be uncovered one tranquil innovation at a time. Understanding this moment in Leonardo's life makes the painting feel less like a finished statement and more like a mind in motion, one that left traces far beyond the figure itself. AI reveals the invisible landscape. When modern researchers applied AI-based imaging and scanning technologies to Janevra da Vinci, they were not looking to change how the painting looks, but to understand how it thinks. What these tools uncovered was an invisible landscape of decisions, revisions, and visual logic that had remained hidden for more than 5 centuries. Far from being decorative, the background and spatial structure of the painting reveal how advanced Leonardo's mind already was. To the naked eye, the landscape behind Janevra appears serene and restrained. A body of water stretches into the distance, framed by trees and softened by atmosphere. Yet AI-assisted analysis, combining infrared reflectography, multispectral imaging, and pattern recognition, shows that this background was carefully engineered to guide perception. The landscape is not simply behind the figure, it is mathematically and psychologically integrated with her presence. One of the most striking findings involves Leonardo's use of aerial perspective. While art historians have long recognized this technique in his later works, AI mapping shows that he was already applying it with remarkable precision here. As the landscape recedes, color saturation drops, edges blur, and tonal contrast diminishes. AI models detected subtle pigment gradients that are nearly impossible to distinguish with the human eye alone. These transitions create a sense of depth that feels natural, even inevitable, yet it is entirely constructed. AI also revealed adjustments beneath the visible paint layers. The shoreline was shifted slightly. The alignment of the water relative to Janevra's shoulders was recalibrated. These were not corrections of mistakes, but refinements of balance. Leonardo appears to have been testing how environmental space could echo emotional tone. The stillness of the water mirrors the introspective quality of Janevra's gaze, reinforcing the mood through spatial harmony. Perhaps most fascinating is how AI detected micro-blending in areas previously assumed to be uniform. Leonardo used his fingers, not just brushes, to soften transitions between landscape elements. This tactile method left behind faint fingerprints, which AI-enhanced scans have isolated and mapped. These marks show where Leonardo physically shaped the image, blurring boundaries to avoid hard separations between forms. The result is a landscape that feels alive, not illustrated.
Speculation, not just about art, but about nature, about man and nature, about the figure and landscape. Leonardo put all this thinking into each picture.
AI analysis also supports the idea that the background was conceived alongside the figure, not added later. Structural symmetry between facial angles and landscape lines suggests intentional correspondence. The slope of distant hills subtly parallels the tilt of Janevra's posture. This creates an unconscious visual rhythm that pulls the viewer inward, making the subject feel embedded in her world rather than placed upon it. What AI ultimately reveals is that Leonardo was not painting scenery. He was constructing perception. The landscape operates as a psychological extension of the sitter, shaping how we interpret her presence. This approach would later reach its peak in works like the Mona Lisa, but here we see its early formation. By uncovering these invisible layers, AI does not diminish Leonardo's mystery. It deepens it. It shows that even in his youth, Leonardo da Vinci was thinking in systems: light, space, emotion, and observation working together. But space and depth were only part of the experiment, because Leonardo's hands were just as involved as his ideas. Fingerprints, sfumato, and human touch. One of the most intimate discoveries revealed through modern scanning and AI-assisted analysis of Janevra da Vinci is not a hidden symbol or compositional secret, but something far more human. Fingerprints embedded directly into the paint surface. These faint impressions identified through high-resolution imaging and enhanced pattern recognition, are widely believed to belong to Leonardo da Vinci himself. They offer rare physical evidence of how closely the artist interacted with his work, not as a distant craftsman, but as someone shaping the image with his own hands. In the late 15th century, painters were trained to rely primarily on brushes, carefully layering pigment with controlled strokes. Leonardo, however, was never content with convention. AI-enhanced surface analysis has shown that in areas such as the juniper foliage and transitions around the background, the paint was gently pressed, dragged, and blended using fingers. These gestures softened edges and dissolved boundaries in ways that brushes alone could not achieve. What remains is a subtle record of motion, an echo of touch frozen in oil.
Curiosity drove him to understand art and science.
This tactile approach is directly tied to Leonardo's early experimentation with sfumato, the technique that would later become one of his defining signatures. Sfumato, meaning smoked or softened, rejects hard outlines in favor of gradual transitions between light and shadow. In Janevra da Vinci, AI scans reveal that these transitions were not merely visual tricks, but physical processes. Pigment was manipulated while still wet, allowing tones to merge seamlessly. The result is a surface that feels organic, almost atmospheric. What makes this especially remarkable is how early this experimentation appears in Leonardo's career. At the time he painted this portrait, sfumato was not yet a fully articulated method. Yet AI analysis shows a consistent intent to blur contours, particularly around the face and hairline. There are no sharp borders separating skin from air. Instead, forms emerge gradually, mimicking how the human eye perceives reality. This suggests that Leonardo was already thinking scientifically about vision, long before formal optical theory caught up. The very fingerprints have indeed become an important point of study in modern studies. Mapping done by AI has separated these marks and made a comparison with the known patterns of Leonardo's later works. Although the certainty of identification is not possible, the similarity in the argument gets stronger that this was a planned working method rather than an unintentional contact. These fingerprints take the painting away from being just an object of silence and change it into a record of action. The fingerprints are an indicator of the technical side, but also have symbolic significance. The Renaissance artists often tried to achieve an idealized perfection, and so they concealed the hard work that went into the creation of the image. Leonardo did the opposite. His touch is still there, and he is saying that not only the intellect but also the body is a part of the genius. The painting tells us the story of creation by the artist's hand. Moments when Leonardo adjusted tone, softened contrast, or rebalanced form by feel rather than measurement. AI has not taken over traditional art history in this case. Rather, it has broadened the scope. By means of recognizing differences in texture and pressure, AI has made it possible for historians to estimate the working rhythm of Leonardo. We can spot the areas where he had slowed down, where he was taking his time, and where he had opted for instinct over precision. Eventually, these fingerprints obliterate the gap between artist and spectator. After 500 years, we are not merely observing the thoughts of Leonardo, but also his hands. In a time dominated by algorithms and analyses, this finding emphasizes a significant fact. Even the most outstanding genius would go through the processes of touch, trial, and human error. Those physical traces lead us directly into the symbolic language of the painting, where meaning was layered just as carefully as paint. The symbolism AI helped decode. For centuries, the symbolism embedded in Janevra da Vinci was visible yet unresolved, recognized, debated, and often partially understood. What has changed in recent years is not the symbolism itself, but our ability to analyze it with precision. Through AI-assisted imaging, pattern recognition, and comparative analysis, scholars have been able to revisit long-standing interpretations and uncover relationships that were previously speculative or overlooked. At the center of this symbolic system stands Janevra da Vinci herself. The juniper bush behind her is no longer viewed as a simple decoration. AI-assisted iconographic mapping has confirmed that the placement, scale, and emphasis of the juniper were intentional and central to the composition. In Renaissance Italy, juniper symbolized chastity and moral virtue, qualities closely associated with noble women. But the symbolism goes deeper. In Italian, juniper is Ginepro, a deliberate linguistic echo of Ginevra's name. AI comparison with other Florentine portraits confirms that this type of visual wordplay was rare and carefully constructed, strengthening the argument that Leonardo was encoding identity directly into nature. The symbolism expands further when examining the reverse of the panel, an area long neglected until modern scanning technologies made detailed study possible. On the back, AI-enhanced infrared and pigment analysis revealed a carefully balanced emblem, a juniper branch flanked by laurel and palm, tied together by a ribbon bearing the Latin phrase virtutem forma decorat, beauty adorns virtue. Rather than presenting beauty as superficial, the phrase asserts that true beauty is an outward expression of moral character. AI played a crucial role in clarifying the relationships between these elements. Laurel, historically linked to poets, intellect, and humanist learning, aligns closely with the literary culture of Florence. Palm branches, associated with victory and moral strength, add a dimension of endurance and ethical triumph. When AI cross-referenced this emblem with known heraldic devices from the period, a compelling connection emerged with Bernardo Bembo, a Venetian diplomat and humanist known to have admired Ginevra deeply. Even more striking was an AI-assisted infrared discovery beneath the visible inscription. Beneath the final motto, analysts identified traces of an earlier phrase believed to match Bembo's personal motto. This suggests revision rather than coincidence. AI layering tools allowed scholars to digitally reconstruct the sequence of changes, indicating that the back of the painting evolved alongside its meaning. This supports the idea that the portrait was not merely a marriage image, but part of a broader intellectual and symbolic exchange. What AI ultimately clarified is that the front and back of the painting are not separate narratives. They are two coordinated statements, one visual and psychological, the other emblematic and intellectual. The portrait presents Ginevra as introspective and distant, while the reverse frames her within a system of virtue, intellect, and admiration. Together, they form a dialogue between appearance and meaning. Importantly, none of this suggests a hidden conspiracy or secret message meant only for insiders. Instead, it reflects Renaissance humanism at work, where art, language, symbolism, and philosophy merged into a single object. AI has not invented new meanings. It has helped confirm intentional structure where ambiguity once reigned. Through modern analysis, we now see how Leonardo da Vinci operated not just as a painter, but as a designer of meaning. Every element served a purpose, every symbol carried weight, and nothing was accidental. The symbolism AI helped decode reinforces what history has long suggested. Leonardo was thinking in systems, visual, intellectual, and symbolic, far ahead of his time. Yet the most revealing message wasn't placed on the front at all. It was hidden in plain sight on the reverse. The enigma on the reverse. For generations, the reverse side of Janevra da Vinci remained one of the most puzzling elements in Leonardo's body of work. While viewers admired the haunting portrait on the front, the back panel, covered with symbols, branches, and a Latin inscription, posed more questions than answers. Art historians debated its meaning for decades, but it wasn't until the combined use of infrared imaging and artificial intelligence that the mystery began to sharpen into something coherent. Traditional visual analysis could only go so far. The emblem appeared deliberate, yet oddly layered, as if it had been revised. Infrared reflectography changed that understanding entirely. By penetrating beneath the visible paint layers, infrared scans revealed earlier markings that had been intentionally covered. AI-assisted reconstruction then allowed researchers to digitally separate those layers, showing not just what was painted, but the sequence in which it evolved. At the center of the reverse composition is a juniper branch, again directly referencing Janevra da Vinci. Flanking it are a laurel leaf and a palm branch, arranged with mathematical balance. The Latin motto, Virtutem forma decorat, runs across a ribbon, tying the elements together. On its own, the phrase suggests a moral ideal, that beauty enhances virtue, not the other way around. But AI analysis revealed that this was not the first inscription placed there. Beneath the visible text, infrared scans uncovered traces of an earlier motto. Pattern-matching algorithms compared the hidden lettering to known heraldic devices from Renaissance Italy. The result was striking. The underlying phrase closely matched the personal motto of Bernardo Bembo, a Venetian ambassador, scholar, and known admirer of Janevra. This discovery reframed the entire painting. Rather than being a single-purpose object, such as a straightforward marriage portrait, the painting now appears to be layered with intention. AI modeling suggests the emblem on the reverse may have been revised to soften or universalize its message, possibly after Ginevra's marriage to Luigi Niccolini. What began as a deeply personal intellectual tribute may have been adapted into a more socially acceptable moral statement. The conclusion that comes from this research goes hand in hand with the knowledge we possess regarding Renaissance court culture. Platonic love, particularly among humanists, was frequently depicted through art, poetry, and symbolism rather than through physical contact. It is said that Bembo composed poems in praise of Ginevra's intelligence and virtue, but not of her sexual attraction. The reverse side of the panel serves almost as a secret dedication, open enough to be noticed, yet discreet enough to prevent scandal. AI also helped to make it clear how the painting's front and back relate to each other. By drawing out the compositional symmetry, the scientists were able to demonstrate that the juniper is not shown on both sides again and again, but as a linkage between the concepts. The front reveals Ginevra's psychological presence. The back characterizes her moral and intellectual identity. They are together a complete portrait, outward and inward. What makes this particularly amazing is that Leonardo da Vinci intended the viewing of both sides of the painting as a dialogue. AI timeline analysis backs the idea that Leonardo was expecting alterations and reinterpretation. He was not making an unchangeable image, but a living object, one that could change its meaning as the situation changed. The mystery of the reverse was never intended to be unraveled easily. It demanded tools that even Leonardo could not have thought of. Still, those tools show something that is very much in line with his genius. An artist who worked in layers, foresaw complexities, and incorporated human relationships into paint and wood with incredible foresight. What was once considered merely to be an ornamented back panel is now recognized as one of the most intellectually sophisticated parts of the work. Its contour finally defined by the cooperation of infrared light and artificial intelligence. Solving that puzzle opens a much larger realization about how Leonardo thought, not in images alone, but in interconnected systems. Leonardo's multi-dimensional thinking. To understand why modern AI continues to uncover new insights in Leonardo's work, it helps to recognize one essential truth. Leonardo da Vinci never thought in a single dimension. Painting, for him, was not an isolated craft. It was where science, philosophy, engineering, psychology, and observation met. Each artwork functioned as a carefully balanced system, long before such thinking had a formal name. Leonardo viewed the world as a chain of connected forces. Light-shaped form. Form implied structure. Structure revealed function. This mindset influenced everything he painted, from faces and landscapes to atmosphere and silence. When AI analyzes his work today, tracing spatial logic and material decisions, It consistently finds this same integrated reasoning. His paintings behave less like static images and more like working models of perception. His notebooks make this approach unmistakable. Leonardo filled thousands of pages with studies that moved seamlessly between anatomy, optics, hydraulics, and geometry. He did not separate art from science because he believed nature itself was unified. A study of muscles informed how a hand should rest. Observations of flowing water shaped how hair curled or shadows dissolved into the air. AI pattern analysis now confirms what historians long suspected. These studies directly influenced his painted forms. In Janevra da Vinci, this multidimensional thinking is everywhere. The sitter is not simply depicted. She exists within a psychological, symbolic, and environmental system. Her distant expression suggests inner life. The landscape reflects emotional depth. The juniper links language, identity, and morality. AI-assisted analysis shows that these elements are mathematically balanced, so no single layer overwhelms the others. Leonardo's methods were also strikingly future-oriented. Infrared scans reveal underdrawings that differ from the final image, showing the revised ideas as he worked. AI workflow simulations suggest these changes were not corrections, but refinements, evidence of thinking in motion rather than rigid planning. He also understood perception as active. By softening contours and avoiding sharp outlines, he forced the viewer's eye to complete forms. This mirrors how the human brain processes incomplete information, a concept now central to machine vision research. What modern technology continues to confirm is that Leonardo was not merely ahead of his time. He operated on a different conceptual level altogether. His genius lies not only in what he painted, but in how he thought. And that layered thinking is exactly why his work still responds to modern tools today. And it's precisely that way of thinking that explains why his work still responds to modern technology today. Why Leonardo's genius still speaks today. More than 5 centuries after it was painted, the portrait of Janevra da Vinci continues to raise new questions, and that alone explains why it still matters. The fact that modern tools like AI and advanced imaging keep revealing new insights is not just a sign of technological progress, but proof of Leonardo da Vinci's lasting depth. His work was never tied to one moment in history because it was never built on surface-level ideas. In an age of fast content and instant visuals, Leonardo's paintings demand patience. AI analysis shows that meaning in his work emerges slowly, through layered details, softened transitions, and carefully structured symbolism. This stands in sharp contrast to today's visual culture, where images are often consumed and forgotten within seconds. Leonardo's art resists that speed. What makes this especially relevant now is how closely his thinking mirrors modern interdisciplinary approaches. AI does not treat his paintings as art alone. It analyzes them as systems that combine optics, psychology, material science, and perception. That is exactly how Leonardo worked. Long before fields were separated, he blended them naturally. AI scans have unearthed hesitation, amendments, and experimentation under the surface as well. These results not only contradict the myth of effortless genius, but also gradually reveal a more honest alternative, a long process of mastering through noticing, tweaking, and being curious. This teaching is very vital in a perfection-seeking society like ours. Meanwhile, AI draws a distinct line. It can spot patterns and reveal hidden layers. However, it still cannot humanize. In Leonardo's art, it mainly exposes the human drive, intentional selections that come from the artist's own life. This is the reason why the portrait continues to have a voice, not as a historical artifact, but as an ever-continuing dialogue between human inquiry and the means we employ to get hold of it. Leonardo's work reminds us that true genius doesn't fade. It waits to be rediscovered. Even centuries later, new technology continues to reveal just how far ahead of his time he was, not by changing the story, but by deepening it. If this exploration changed the way you see Leonardo's art, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into art, history, and hidden discoveries. And before you go, watch the next video appearing on your screen. You won't want to miss what it reveals next.